Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Beyond the Cage. I'm your host, Jim Graham. Alongside me is my co-host, Billy Brandt. On today's show, we are going to break down UFC Fight Night San Diego, and we are also going to pick the main card fights for the UFC's first trip to Scotland, UFC Glasgow, this weekend on Fox Sports 1. Once again, I'm your host, Jim Graham. You can follow me on Twitter at Jim Graham, and he is my co-host, Big Shot Bill. You can follow him at WBrandt21. And how's it going today, Billy?
Man, good. I just want to say before we even start, how lucky are we to get all these fight cards packed together and all of them be so good?
That is true. And also, with the exception of UFC 189, free on TV as well.
Yeah, and there hasn't been one disappointing card. They've all been pretty exciting.
And that's including UFC on Fox 16, which will be coming up here next weekend in Chicago. We have that. So, yeah, a lot of cards going on here in July. But before we get to the couple cards here for this week, let's get to some headlines. First, let's start with Fedor Emelianenko. It was reported a couple days ago through Union MMA, a Russian outlet, and then reposted by many outlets here in the United States, Bloody Elbow among them, that Fedor is looking for a comeback. He retired in 2012. He is now 38 years old. He has been out of the sport for 3 years, and he says that he's maintained pretty good physical shape, and he's had a lot of times to kind of heal old injuries and not kind of have that daily grind of training all the time, and he feels that it's time to come back and have a couple of fights. Now, the biggest thing in this announcement was there wasn't an organization listed that he was coming back to. Obviously, he's been doing a lot of promotional stuff with Bellator, going to their fan fest and doing signing. And obviously, he got to know Scott Coker pretty well towards the end of his career, fighting a few times for Strikeforce. So that is a likely candidate, him going inside the Bellator cage. There's also the fact that he's been tied to M1 and a lot of the Russian outlets, running his management team, so he could return at least for one fight, returning to fight in his home country, or at least Europe. And obviously the third choice is the Ultimate Fighting Championship, the one organization that he has never fought for. And there's a lot of intriguing fights, and a lot of fighters have already called him out in the heavyweight division, including last night's main event victor, Frank Mir. Randy Couture said he would come out of retirement to fight Fedor Emelianenko. You also have a great matchup of, a rematch between him and Mirko Cro Cop could be potentially on the table. There's a lot of interesting matchups. I don't think he's going to be able to compete for a title. Well, in Bellator, but and not in the UFC or anything. But the reason I'm against it is because he's now 38 years old and he's been out of the sport 3 years. If it was maybe 18 months, I can go, yeah, all right. But 3 years is a very long time without really training. I mean, sure, he obviously said he's going to the gym and stuff, and sure, that helps. It's not like he just let himself go to hell or anything. But to take on some of these heavyweights now, with the power they possess, and he was already starting to kind of get knocked out there towards the end. I mean, heck, he got knocked out by Dan Henderson, a guy who's now fighting at 185 pounds. How's he going to fare? I know he didn't go well, but a guy like Todd Duffy even, or Stipe or, JDS. Overeem's now better than ever. I mean, I don't know. Now, if the only thing that we're not factoring is whether he really needs the money. And sometimes when you're desperate, maybe doing things that you shouldn't do. And I wonder if that is the case here with Fedor. I wonder if that's more changed his mind than just feeling the need to compete again.
Yeah, at first I was pretty against it. I didn't see a reason why to come back and risk it. But then I sort of think of guys like Cro Cop, Andrei Arlovski, or Frank Mir that are kind of having these late runs, and I guess I can't knock it. But I think the difference is if he comes to the UFC and tries getting that sort of little revenge tour like Cro Cop or something, I can respect that. But if he sits at Bellator fighting Kimbo Slice or something, I don't really like it. But I mean, I guess there'll be big money in it for him if that's the reason.
Now, of course, Bellator doesn't own like a fight contract with him or anything. So I don't think that would sideline any possible negotiations with the UFC. But to me, it has to be the UFC. Because what would he really prove going to Bellator? And like you said, taking on Kimbo or Czech Congo or Alexander Volkov or even Minkinov?
Yeah,
Nothing really. Nothing really. The whole thing was the fact he's been labeled pretty much since Pride ended as the best fighter to never fight in the UFC. He's had that label, and as far as I know, he was always going to have that label. He was going to be the one guy that UFC fans, or mainly, I shouldn't say mainly American fans, but most American fans didn't get to see a lot of his handiwork and Pride until they uploaded stuff on Fight Pass. So this would be the first time really for American fans to see Fedor live and in person. And obviously, he would get a big payday for that. We all know negotiations kind of stalled many, many years ago after the collapse of Affliction. They just couldn't bring Fedor to the UFC. And yeah, sure, he's lost some of his luster and whatnot, but that's good for the UFC. They can get him at a less price. But it just has to be, because what other organization would he really get something out of it other than going to the Ultimate Fighting Championship?
Yeah, but I mean, who knows? I know it sounds ridiculous fighting like Czech Congo or Kimbo, but I got to imagine there's huge paydays in that for him.
I mean, there is, but wouldn't there be a huge payday fighting even someone like, I know he won, but even someone like Frank Mir? Or could you imagine Randy Couture comes out of retirement to fight Fedor? That's not going to be a huge payday?
Maybe. I don't know, though, man. The UFC is it's weird. It depends how the UFC did it. Do you think they'd make it headline like a pay-per-view or something crazy?
Maybe, but it would for sure be a co-main event on a pay-per-view. It'd be on a pay-per-view for sure, whether it'd be headlining or not. Honestly, that would be not to take anything away from Mighty Mouse, that's like the perfect co-main event for like a Mighty Mouse fight or a Dillashaw fight. Somebody that's not as highly ranked, you can go, you're going to see the return of Fedor against Couture, a fight that tried to happen 6-7 years ago. Oh, and you get to see one of the best champions in the sport. That's how I would build it. Because those champions may get that boost and you get people buying into that pay-per-view. And obviously, at that point, you're going to stick around to watch one more fight, thus being the title, whether it being Mighty Mouse or someone like a Dillashaw.
I think we might see the Couture fight, but I also think that'll be in Bellator.
Yeah, well, his son's fighting there now, and he's done some promotional things and whatnot. And obviously, again, he's not contracted with Bellator or anything, but I don't know. If I'll put it this way. If Scott Coker can pull off getting Randy Couture and Fedor Emelianenko out of retirement and it's not in a UFC cage, that's a huge boon for Scott Coker.
Yeah,
that's. I think if that happens, Dana White has to go from saying, "Oh, Scott Coker's a friend," to "I gotta look out for this guy."
Yeah,
I think it turns very quickly if he could pull something like that off.
Yeah, the fact that he even got Fedor is kind of crazy. You can see all the buzz it generated that quick. And then Couture, too. Watch out. Kimbo and Shamrock, come on.
Yeah, if he puts that on Spike TV, let's get this straight. If he puts it on Spike TV, doesn't do like a Bellator pay-per-view for it, I wouldn't be surprised if it ends up being the highest rated televised card.
Yeah, I can see that.
I mean, there's no way that generates a lot of buzz. And they've done well with those, what they've been calling like tentpole events, the last couple of ones they've done. And to me, this is like 10 times bigger than Tito against Stephan Bonner or Kimbo against Shamrock. This is a million times bigger than that.
And they've been growing every time. I mean, the Tito Bonner fight broke the records, and the Kimbo Shamrock breaks the records. This will, I think, break those records. So,
and you'd even be more if Bellator could pull this off. Do it in Vegas. Just have it right in Vegas, right in the UFC's face. That's what I would do. If I was Scott Coker and I could pull off Randy Couture against Fedor Emelianenko, I'm doing it right in Vegas.
It'd be crazy if they could pull that off. I don't know if they'll do that.
I mean, there's nothing that says they can't do a fight in Vegas, but they kind of Bellator has really avoided Vegas. But right. I think even the UFC would have to concede that is a fight that's Vegas worthy.
Yeah. Hey, Bellator, do it.
I mean, you got Mandalay Bay, you got the Thomas and Mack Center. Because I think MGM has kind of become like the home of the UFC now. Those would be the two bigger arenas, and I think you could easily sell either one out.
We'll see what they do.
All right,
this is real early speculation. We don't even know if they're going to get that fight.
Right. All right, let's get to the UFC here. Honda Housey, I believe that's how you pronounce her name. Do I have that correctly? The R's are like H's.
100%.
Okay. No, Ronda Rousey. They did the ESPN ESPY Awards. They tape them on Thursday night, then they re-show them on Sunday night on ESPN. They had their awards, so you already know who won, which is weird. They released that information. Anyway, she was nominated in 2 different categories, including Female Athlete of the Year and Fighter of the Year, and she won not 1, but 2 ESPYs, winning both of those categories. In the Fighter of the Year category, she beat out fellow UFC fighter Cowboy Cerrone, as well as boxing stars Floyd Mayweather, Jakadi Golovkin, if I said that correctly, and Terrence Crawford to win Fighter of the Year. I believe she's the first UFC fighter to win the ESPY for Fighter of the Year. And in the female athlete category, she beat out all-time legend Serena Williams, as well as skiing star Lindsey Vonn and UConn basketball player Breanna Stewart. The Fighter of the Year is probably more impressive. Obviously, Floyd's kind of dominated. Him and Mayweather have kind of dominated the last couple of years. So for her to come out and win it, very impressive. And then the female athlete one, Serena's probably won that thing 5 or 6 times. So that one's not as impressive. I mean, no offense to the UConn basketball player, but we're talking about a collegiate basketball player. We're not talking about a professional yet. Lindsey Vonn is definitely a tremendous skier, but that one to me seemed more of a no-brainer to name her Female Athlete of the Year. That seemed like a no-brainer. But the Fight of the Year is quite a surprise. And, of course, Rousey was quoted as saying, I guess Floyd, in regards to the Fight of the Year, I guess Floyd now know what it means to be beat by a girl. Because there was kind of talk about him not knowing who Ronda Rousey is or whatnot. So if he doesn't know, I think he might know now.
Yeah, Floyd, I don't know, it's crazy. I'm surprised Conor McGregor wasn't even in there as a nomination, though, for real. He seems like he's done so much this year when Ronda's kind of been dominating for a few now.
I wonder if he was even there.
Who knows?
Just like invited just to be there.
Right.
He would have been a great guy to have do, like, present an award or something.
Yeah, he's been all over the place, though, so who knows?
He'll definitely probably be at next year's ESPYs.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I'm excited. I usually try to watch the ESPYs. They're usually pretty fun. They get a pretty good comedian to host. There's some fun skits. In fact, I'm not sure if it said who's hosting. I have the UFC article that just kind of says that she won. I'm not really sure who's hosting. I'll maybe look that up real quick. But, yeah, I think that it's good for the sport to have her host it, or not to have her host it, to have her win Fighter of the Year. And hopefully this paves the way for more athletes winning.
Yeah, as far as MMA goes, good for Ronda and good for the sport.
And Joel McHale is hosting the ESPYs this year from The Soup. So that's definitely got to be good. I watch The Soup every week, so he's a funny dude. Not a fan of The Soup, Billy?
Not familiar.
Okay. Or what about his show Community?
Him
and Donald Glover?
Can't say I'm a huge fan.
Honestly, I didn't like Community, but I love The Soup. So, all right, we'll move on. The next headline was announced at San Diego during the broadcast of last night's fight there at the Valley View Hotel and Casino. UFC 191, which will be Saturday, September 5th in Las Vegas, now has a main event. Money Mouse Johnson will rematch John Dodson for the flyweight title. Rematch of their first bout back in January of 2013, in which, of course, Money Mouse was victorious in defending his title. Also on the main card, Anthony Johnson, he's going to be taking on Jan Blachowicz. Yeah, that's happening. And also Paige Van Zandt against Alex Chambers. We kind of already talked about those two. Were scheduled to fight, just needed a venue and date. They got it, UFC 191. Also, I don't know if they'll end up making the main card or not, but John Lineker, who's now being forced up to bantamweight, he's going to have to deal with Francisco Rivera. So those are the 4 fights as of right now. I'm not happy with Anthony Johnson against Blankowicz. Blankowicz is coming off a loss to Jimmy Manuwa. I don't know how then he gets a guy coming off fighting for the title. I get they're both coming off losses, but honestly, Rumble Johnson against Jimmy Manuwa is really not that much different, in my opinion. Interesting. Where I knew PVZ was fighting Chambers, I'm not thrilled about it, but I kind of get that one a little more. But and then Rivera, he looked awesome in his last fight against Bruce Leroy, and I kind of feel bad for John Lineker, who's now actually going to have to fight at bantamweight, and he does not get a very easy test in his first bout at 135.
Yeah, I like all those fights. My problem is with the Rumble Johnson fight. I don't know if they're trying to just restart this hype and give him someone to just destroy real quick or what they're trying to do. But even Jimmy Manuwa, like you said, he wins the fight. It's obviously a better matchup and a little bit in the rankings. Why not give him that fight?
Yeah, and it's not like that Manuwa. Honestly, the fight between Blankowicz and Manuwa sucked. Go back and watch it. It was not a very good fight. So that's why him taking on Manuwa was really not that much different than him taking on Blankowicz. They both sucked it up there. I believe that was in the Poland card. So, yeah, it just makes more sense, too, because then if Jimmy Manuwa does win, he's now on a 2-fight win streak, one of those being over Rumble Johnson. That's a lot more impressive because there's no way that Jan Blachowicz beats Rumble Johnson. It just doesn't happen. So, and plus, if he beats Jan Blachowicz, which we all know he should do and will do, what does that do for him? He's pretty much right where he's at, waiting for a title shot. I don't know. It really doesn't do much. I don't really get it. It doesn't really help Rumble Johnson. And also, if that's going to be the co-main event, you know, we talked about trying to push up a guy like Mighty Mouse. Does that really help push up Mighty Mouse, Rumble Johnson, fighting some guy no one's ever heard of?
Not a chance. I mean, a lot of people love Rumble, but I don't see people getting on there just for that fight.
Yeah, it's got, like I said, it's got to be something that could easily be a main event on its own and help try to push up Mighty Mouse a little bit. He just, for whatever reason, hasn't won over the fans. It's hard to believe, but arguably the best pound-for-pound fighter in the world has trouble selling pay-per-views. He just does. I don't know if it's his personality. Maybe he's just so good that people just don't bother tuning in. Whatever argument you want to make, just people aren't tuning in as much as others. So that one needs a better co-main event than usual.
Weren't they going to didn't DC get Gustafsson, then DC's injured, right?
I know he was getting Gustafsson. I didn't hear anything about him, DC, being injured.
I think he got an injury and he's out of that. So I would rather even them run that Johnson Gustafsson because there's so much dispute over the headbutt and everything. Let me see that again.
Yeah, that because I mean, and especially with Gustafsson saying that he would beat him 9 times out of 10.
Yeah, he had all these problems about that fight. Well, here you go. Rematch it real quick.
Well, that's the decision they're making for 191. So, all right, let's get to UFC Fight Night 72, better known as UFC San Diego. There were 6 fights shown on the main card, and the first fight of the evening was in the welterweight division as Alan Joblay took on Matt Dwyer. They ended up with the fight of the night bonus award there. And this was definitely a great fight between these two welterweights. The biggest difference, though, I noticed, and looking at the overall striking numbers, it doesn't paint as big of a picture as Dwyer is listed with throwing 6 more strikes than Joblay, 122 to 116. But it just seemed that not only was Joblay being more active, again, that's just the way it seemed, he was a lot more accurate. And I think that Dwyer, his kind of big frame and style, his hands were low, kind of has an awkward stance. It just didn't seem like he could ever get into rhythm. And it seemed like Joblay was constantly pressuring and attacking with something. And Dwyer didn't really answer for the most part. I think that first round, despite the illegal knee there that ended up getting a point taken away, that to me was like the closest round. Dwyer landed some shots, but after that, To me, Alan Joblay really just tore up the young man there, Dwyer.
Yeah, I was a little worried about that first round because if that was 10-8, even though Jaboy dominated after, it could have been like a draw or something. But this Jaboy is so fun to watch. I think he landed he rocked him good with it was like a cartwheel kick at the end of round two that I jumped out of my chair. I mean, he throws all types of strikes. He kept the pressure up. He's really fun to watch, and it was a great fight for him.
Yeah, like I said, not only the striking numbers are pretty even in terms of thrown, but Joe Boy outstruck him 63-34. And that kind of just, like I said, that kind of was painting the picture of Joe Boy was able to come in, land, but then Dwyer really wasn't able to counter. And he just seemed really hesitant. Like I said, he did have his moments. I think he hurt Joe Boy. I think he did land some solid shots. But for Dwyer, I'd like to see a little increase in output and his hands up a little higher. It seemed like his hands were really low in this fight, and Joe Boy was able to land quite a few, higher kicks. I think it's just the fact that Dwyer's 6'4". Maybe he is a little overconfident that guys are going to reach up that high, but you give guys an open invitation, they're going to try more often than not.
Yeah, especially Alan Jaboy. He throws all types of wild stuff, so you got to look out.
The next fight of the evening, that came in the lightweight division as Kevin Lee took on James Mutassiri. And, of course, as fans know, I got a chance to talk to Kevin Lee before this fight, and we kind of talked about him, using his striking and mixing up his wrestling, which he pretty much did, as he was able to land a couple of strikes and then in kind of a scramble, was able to quickly get the back of James Mutassiri and then was able to work for about a minute and then sink in the rear naked choke, getting the tap at the 256 marker for Big John to step in and stop this one. And the biggest thing I noticed in this fight was how quickly in that scramble Kevin Lee got the back and then sunk in the hooks. That to me was really the key of him getting this victory. Mutassiri wasn't able to stop that, and really from there couldn't stop the submission game. And for Kevin Lee, this is not only big because it's his fourth win in a row, but it's big is because he got the finish. He had a couple of decisions mixed in there, and even his one loss was a decision. So this is a really big statement, taking on a talented guy, Mutassiri, and beating him in the first round. This to me was kind of a statement win for the Motown Phenom.
Yeah, it was a real good performance for him. I mean, he came in there and did exactly what he had to do. Took him down quick, got the back, didn't rush it, was patient, finished the choke. So you can't ask for much more. And like you said, the most important thing is when you finish guys, it makes such a better statement, even if you're winning a lot of the close decisions. But when you go out there and get the finish, it'll move you forward.
Before we get to the next fight, I just want to make a quick note. Lyman Good, former Bellator welterweight champion, the first Bellator welterweight champion. He made his UFC debut. He was victorious, knocking out Andrew Craig in the very first fight of the night. And also, Hani Yahya was able to win a split decision, and Jessica Andrade gets back on the winning track as she took on former tough contestant Sarah Morris. So I wanted to kind of miss that as well. Oh, yeah, Sam Cecilia also beat Yautins Meza. So those were a couple of the notable undercard fights. Before we get to Manny Gambirian against Scott Jorgensen in the bantamweight division, a match with two WEC veterans here. And even though he seemed a bit faster moving back up to bantamweight, Billy, it seems as though Jorgensen had trouble dealing with the size of Gambirian, who already I thought was kind of a beast at 145. At 135, very, very hard to handle, very physically strong guy. And, I mean, there were a lot of reversals, a lot of submission attempts by both men, but the 5 takedowns by Gambirian were the difference. And when it was standing, I think Scott was so worried about getting taken down or getting into one of those scrambles, he really didn't let his hands go that we've seen in fights past, and he ended up getting outstruck 65-56 en route for a unanimous decision for Manny Gambirian. And like I said, even though this was Jorgensen's first fight back at bantamweight, this is a really big win for Gambirian, who's now trying to make a run at 135. But if his conditioning can hold up like that, added with his power and, judo ability, he is a scary guy to look out for in this bantamweight division.
Yeah, the most thing to take from this fight is basically all that. Manny Gambirian, he goes to this division and he didn't look to tire out too much. He looks like he didn't lose a lot of strength, didn't look drained or nothing. And it was a really good fight as far as like the grappling exchanges were real exciting, back and forth, them changing positions and stuff. But Gambirian just got sort of the good edge, got a little more striking off, so he gets the win here.
And for Gambirian, he's a guy, like I said, now moves up in the bantamweight division. We all know the title fight's going down next weekend with Dillashaw and Barao. I'm not sure what Faber's future lies. Obviously, he's now kind of tied up with the Ultimate Fighter. That kind of delays him a little bit to fighting probably until the finale in December, I would imagine, or at least the pay-per-view around that time, whether he actually fights in the finale or not. But, I'm trying to think. Thomas Almeida, I think, against Gambirian might be a very big fight. And the winner of that, you could even say, gets a title shot. You could make a case for that. I think that'd be a very interesting matchup. And you have, the grappler kind of versus striker edge as well.
Yeah, that'd be actually a really good fight.
We'll see. We'll see what happens, though. But, yeah, I think that'd be an intriguing matchup. The next fight of the evening in the women's bantamweight division, Holly Holm took on Marion Renault, and Renault was not able to pull the upset in 2 consecutive fights, as she was able to not get the W this time, losing a unanimous decision to Holly Holm. And really, this was just a question of output. Holly Holm just was throwing way more, being way more active, and obviously, as a result, landing way more. And this is just in thrown strikes here, Billy. Holly Holm threw 184 strikes in this fight for 15 minutes. Renault threw 82. That's pretty much the story of the fight. Just Holly Holm was way more active, and as a result, and landed strikes 70 to 32, nearly doubling or over doubling the total there for Marion Renault. And really, her weapon of choice was the front kick, whether that was the front side kick, front head kick, or front leg kick. She was really relying heavily on that front leg. Did not use as many punching combinations as we saw in the Pennington fight, but I think overall this was a better performance than the Pennington fight. We saw, being way more active, but you could say it was somewhat disappointing because she didn't get a finish against a lower ranked fighter. So however you want to look at it, but I still think overall it was a better performance for Holly Holm the second time around.
Yeah, she looked a lot better, like you're saying. She threw a lot more strikes and was more active. She landed more, looked more dominant. But the thing is, as far as being like, oh, she's the one to come challenge Ronda or anything, I still don't think we got that fight out of her. She didn't pull no nasty finish that's like, oh, man, like, that's how she was kind of brought in as this hype. And I don't think this was the best fight for that. Definitely a step in the right direction. She looked a lot more comfortable in there. But, yeah, it wasn't nothing too shocking to believe, like, all right, you know what, this is the one to beat Ronda.
The co-main event of the evening in the lightweight division, as Tony Ferguson took on Josh Thompson. And I've seen a lot of Josh Thompson fights. Probably seen every Josh Thompson fight in the last 5 years. And I don't think I've ever seen Josh Thompson get beat up like this. He got manhandled by El Kukui as he got outstruck. How do you like 101 to 35? Getting outstruck in this one, including a dismantling in the second round, getting outstruck 55 to 8 in the second frame, which left the former Strikeforce champion pretty bloodied and messed up. And in the third round, Ferguson was pretty much on cruise control. He didn't overexert himself, didn't want to get caught with anything crazy or a takedown. But really, the tale of this fight was the front kick. Again, very similar to what Holly Holm was using, but front kicks to the body, and you saw that kind of really affect Thompson early in the fight. And then kind of leading into the second round, he was able to land another hard one, followed up with the elbow, and I believe a huge straight left, which cut open Thompson, and that kind of started the downfall there of the Punk. And like I said, Tony Ferguson, the third round, kind of on cruise control, just kind of pick and choosing the shots, but very dominant performance by Tony Ferguson, and to me, I'd like to see him against Khabib for the #1 contendership. I think that's what's next for this man.
Yeah, this dude, Tony Ferguson, he's so good to watch because, his movement is different and exciting. Like, he has this weird movements. He throws a lot of different strikes. He really did, like you said, let that front kick to the body go, which you could tell was getting to Thompson. And then you put him on his back, and he's so active off his back. He's constantly threatening submissions. I think he put like a Kimura that ended up sweeping Thompson to his back. And just everywhere you go with this dude, he's so dangerous. And I really do want to see him fight for at least a title contention fight next, because so far everything he's done has been impressive. All credit in the world to Thompson, because I thought he was going to get finished like 6 different times, and somehow he kept moving forward and kept throwing. That was amazing in its own. But Tony Ferguson definitely needs a title contenders fight.
As we know, Cerrone's already going to be taking an RDA at some point this year. We're not 100% sure. It looks to be possibly November at the earliest. So with that kind of book, to me, Khabib had an injury. He's coming back. He should be ready to go for later this year. They showed that graphic there when Ferguson won. It said most active wins, on a streak. It said 8 for Cerrone, 6 for Ferguson, 6 for Khabib. It only makes sense that Ferguson fights Khabib for the #1 contendership in my mind.
That's what I'd like to see. And maybe if Khabib, who knows when we see him fight next. If not, I like Anthony Pettis in there too.
Yeah, I think if Khabib can't go, if Pettis, if he can return, if Ferguson can be the guy of the caliber of Pettis, the former champion, definitely deserving of a title shot. So the only other, if they weren't fighting in August, I would really say that rematch against Michael Johnson would be a good one, even for #1 contender. But he's obviously taking on Beneil Dariush coming up in Nashville. So it kind of depends, but I'm hoping they can put that Khabib fight together. And actually, what would be perfect for the UFC is that they can book that the same day as Cerrone and RDA.
Also, another name to throw. I don't know if he's staying at 170, but if Benson Henderson decides to come back to 155, another great fight.
That's true. I think he's kind of sorting some things out / being injured. I think he's trying to figure out what's next for him. So, yeah, obviously, always Ben Henderson is an intriguing matchup. The main event of the evening in the heavyweight division, former heavyweight champion Frank Mir took on Todd Duffy. We knew this one was going to be quick, Billy. We knew this one was going to end in a finish. We thought it was either going to be a knockout by Duffy or a submission by Mir. Ended up being a knockout by Frank Mir at the 113 marker. And this fight was just simply two big dudes throwing at each other. They both had their moments right there until the finish. It looked like Duffy, he was the one on top at that point, landed a couple of nice strikes. Mir was kind of reeling. Duffy got caught coming in with his hands down, trying to land another power punch. Mir countered right in the button, and Todd Duffy was out cold on the canvas, with Big John again having to step to this one at a minute 13. And maybe Frank Mir's not done yet. Maybe I run him off too soon, but this is now his second straight first-round knockout victory, first dispatching Bigfoot Silva, now Todd Duffy. I know he called out Fedor, but maybe we'll see that Crow Cop Mir rematch next. Of course, that's one of the guys that Mir was able to beat, and Crow Cop's looking to go on a revenge tour, so maybe we'll see a Mir Crow Cop matchup next.
I think that's the clear best next fight. They're both coming off big Mir wasn't really like a revenge tour win, but Crow Cop had a big knockout. People said he was done. Mir doing the same thing. Let them go one more time. And I was so wrong in this fight, because I basically ripped Frank Mir off his done. And if there was any way I would have told you he would have won this fight, it was not doing what he did and just going out there biting down his mouthpiece and swinging. And that's exactly what he did, and he got the big knockout.
Yeah, it was definitely a bold move by Frank Mir to come out and employ that type of strategy against Todd Duffy, because that's what Duffy likes to do. There's no secret of Todd Duffy's strategy. So really to kind of play Duffy at his own game and end up getting the better of him is awfully impressive. And this is a real big loss for Todd Duffy. Not just to get knocked out cold, but this win was really going to catapult him as kind of the next big thing in the heavyweight division. And by him losing, it does set him back quite a bit for trying to make a run at the title.
And I think everyone sort of wrote Frank Mir off, so it looks even worse. Like, this is like a fight everyone's like, oh, Todd Duffy's, going to finish Frank Mir, put him away, and then he gets knocked out that brutally. It hurts all around.
All right, before we get to this weekend's UFC Glasgow card, UFC Fight Night 72, let's take a quick look at Bellator 140, which will happen this Friday, July 17th on Spike TV from the Mohegan Sun Hotel and Casino there. Very excited for this main event, and I'm so glad it's finally happening. We get to see Douglas Lima against Andrei Korzhakov for the Bellator welterweight title. Oh, man, this is going to be fantastic. We have two of the best strikers in the welterweight division of anyone's welterweight division, and Korzhakov and Douglas Lima, and they're finally going to meet inside the Bellator cage. I just can't wait for this one. I mean, I've been waiting. Korzhakov, I believe, won a tournament not too long ago, and obviously, Douglas Lima has been wrecking guys since becoming the Bellator champion. I know Paul Daly was supposed to be in there, and then, of course, as we know, Douglas Lima got hurt. Daly fought someone else, kind of had a sloppy performance. Daly kind of lost his place online. And speaking of Daly, he actually will be fighting on this card against Dennis Olsen. So if Daly can keep a win, get a win here, he'll probably face the winner of this matchup. But this is the matchup I kind of wanted all along, going back to that British Invasion card they had earlier this year. And I don't know. I just have a feeling this thing could be fight of the year and knockout of the year in one fight. This is two tremendous guys here stepping in for Bellator.
Yeah, there's no way this fight can't be fireworks. And I'm so excited. I know it doesn't have nothing to do with it, but just the way like Bellator's last fights have been, like with the whole Kimbo, whatever that is, but the Pitbull fight, they've all been so good. And these two against each other can't go wrong.
It's so hard because they're such dynamic strikers, and that's where it's going to play. None has really shown much of a grappling game or really a desire to go on the ground. It's really hard to say. I gave a slight edge to Douglas Lima just because of his height and reach. He's a little longer and a little taller. But other than that, I mean, Korzhakov has one loss in his career, and that's to Ben Askren. Everybody else he's decimated. And for Douglas Lima, he has 5 in his career, but his only loss in Bellator, I believe, also was to Ben Askren. He's decimated everybody. So they ain't taking on a wrestler like that in this matchup. And also, I find it hard to believe that it's going to go the 25 minutes. I find it hard to believe that one of these two gentlemen don't find some type of strike to knock each other out, too. And not only that, I don't know if they can maintain a pace like that for 25 minutes. I just think eventually somebody's going to get hit with something hard, and they're going to be out cold.
Yeah, it has to. I'm sitting here thinking, like, maybe if they come out and respect each other too much, but I really don't think that'll happen in this fight. It's going to go back and forth until someone goes down.
Like I said, a lot of notable names here on this Bellator 140 card. As I mentioned, Paul Daly will be taking on Dennis Olsen. You also have, believe it or not, the first fight of the night, a guy like Waylon Lowe will be taking on Ryan Quinn. You also have Josh Neer against Matt Secor. Brennan Ward will be taking on Roger Carroll. Michael Page will be taking on Rudy Bears, and also you got Paul Bradley against Chris Honeycutt. So a lot of notable names there. I'm not sure exactly what's on the main card. I'm going to double check here. But however they go, at least with those names I threw out there, it's a pretty solid supporting fights there for Lima against Korzhakov.
Yeah, I've been such a big fan of Michael Page since like right when he got signed to Bellator. I had a friend that showed me like one of his highlight tapes from all his stuff. This dude is, I've never seen anything like it. His movement is so crazy. His striking is amazing. Really watch out for that fight. Win or lose, that dude is so exciting. I mean, he hasn't lost yet, but just his style alone, it'll never put on a boring performance.
And I'm looking up for the main card here. And just so people know, it's no longer just Bellator.com. It's Bellator.spike.com. Just in case people are wondering, I don't know if they frequently visit Bellator's website. But 5 fights will be shown on the main card here. And it looks like it will be Paul Daly's fight, Brendan Ward, the Bradley and Honeycutt, and then Michael Page. So that's what end up making it on the main card. And also, real quickly, their next fight, August 28th from Temecula, Brandon Gertz against Melvin Gillard will be the main event. That's very, very interesting to me. We've actually had Brandon Gertz on the show. He's a very cool guy, but it's kind of a huge step in competition for him to be taking on Melvin Gillard. It's kind of a curious main event, in my opinion.
I mean, hey, let's hype Melvin Gillard up, right?
I guess. I don't know. All right. to UFC Fight Night 72. We'll pick the main card fights here for the matchup. I believe the first fight of the evening will be in the lightweight division as Leonardo Teixeira, better known as Leonardo Mafra, he will be taking on Stevie Ray. Looking at Mafra, the former Ultimate Fighter Brazil contestant, he checks in with an overall record of 12-2. Of those 12 victories, 8 are by knockout. So far in the UFC, just a 1-1 record. His last fight was his first victory in the organization, defeating Kane Carrioza at UFC Fight Night 62. Looking at Stevie Ray, he fights there in Scotland, so he'll be the hometown guy. 17-5 in his career. 8 of 17 career victories are by submission. And I believe, yes, he'll be fighting for the second time in the UFC. He debuted back at the Poland card, UFC Fight Night 64, and defeated Marcin Bandel. Mafra is definitely a very good striker. I think he showed that on Tough Brazil, and I think that's kind of what he's been known for so far in his 2 UFC fights. I don't remember the fight Stevie Ray's debut. Solid striker, but obviously, like I said, 8 submission victories. If I was Ray, I would try to get this thing to the ground as soon as possible and try to avoid really striking with Mafra there.
Yeah, it looks like this is going to be sort of a striker versus submission guy, but I'm just going to say a quick X factor. This dude's nickname is Braveheart, and I will never pick against Stevie Braveheart Ray now just because of that nickname. So look forward for that guy.
So in preparation for the Scotland card, Billy, how many times do you plan on watching Braveheart?
I mean, at least probably every night leading up. I mean, as much as I can.
So are you painting your face blue and white with the Scottish flag when you tune in at 1 p.m. Eastern Saturday afternoon on Fox Sports 1?
100%, and I'll probably scream freedom at the beginning of every round.
Do you think there's any chance Mel Gibson is in attendance?
I mean, it'd be a disgrace if he wasn't.
Do you think Mel Gibson even knows what the UFC is? Or is he too worried about being an anti-Semite to worry about what's going on?
He's a huge Stevie Ray fan.
Man. Maybe he's a huge Stevie Ray Vaughan fan. I don't know. All right, we're getting off topic here on Beyond the Cage. This fight's at 155 pounds. I don't know if I said that. Anyways, let's move on here to the welterweight division. Leon Edwards against Paul Palalik. I was not really impressed with Palalik in his last fight as he took on Sheldon Westcott. Again, that was back at the Poland card. Overall, in his career, Palalik is 11-1 fighting out of Poland as he takes on Leon Roberts, who has 9 victories to his credit, 9-2 overall in his career. And Leon Roberts definitely more of a stand-up fighter. I think Palalik is too, but even when it was standing against Sheldon Westcott, and that was his first victory in the UFC, that being for Palalik. Yeah, I said his first name right. Palalik. 1-1 overall, 6 of 11 victories by knockout. Leon Edwards, as I mentioned, 9-2, 5 of 9 victories by knockout. And looking at his UFC tenure, he is 1-1 as well, defeating Seth Baczynski, also on that Poland card, knocking him out in 8 seconds. I know that maybe there's not a lot to go on. It's one fight, but obviously Leon Roberts was way more impressive in his Poland fight than Pawlowski was fighting in his home country. And maybe Palalik will show us something different this time around here in Scotland, but yeah, it's hard to pick a guy coming off not pick a guy coming off an 8-second knockout performance.
Yeah, it's like Pollock didn't look too good. Edwards looked the best you could probably look. We don't really know. It could have been like the luck, but I think this will just turn into mostly a striking match. And from what we've seen, you kind of have to side with Edwards for getting it done so fast.
The next fight of the evening will be in the women's strawweight division as Joanne Calderwood will take on Courtney Casey. Kind of a letdown for this matchup. Of course, Calderwood was originally scheduled to take on Beck Hyatt. Beck Hyatt had to pull out of this fight about 2 weeks ago. Stepping in is Courtney Cast Iron Casey, 4-1 in her career, both wins by finish, 2 knockouts, 2 submissions to her credit. Most recently has fought in the Pacific Extreme Combat Organization, and she also fought in the XFC, fighting for their strawweight title, actually against Pearl Gonzalez, got submitted. I actually remember that fight, believe it or not. It's one of the few XFC fights I actually turned into. That was an incredible fight. But since then has gone on to win 3 straight fights. So I know people are looking at this as an easy win for Calderwood, but Courtney Casey is definitely a very solid competitor. And, taking this on short notice, I give her all the credit in the world. Not only that, she has to fly all the way to Scotland. I believe it says she trains in Phoenix, Arizona, or at least that's where she's originally from, and has to fight a girl in her home country. This is no easy task. Got to give Casey here a lot of credit. She's the underdog against Joanne Calderwood, who is 9-1 in her career, 5 of 9 wins by knockout, or 5 of 9 wins by decision. Her first loss in her career came in the Poland card. Did not have a great performance. Got kind of pressured early. Got taken down and got submitted in the first round by Marina Moroz. Obviously, another upset could happen in this one, but I got to feel that Joanne Calderwood is not only got to have that loss motivator, but fighting in Scotland has to really motivate her as well. And as much as I can credit Courtney Casey, she has a lot going against her against JoJo Calderwood.
Yeah, 100%. Like you said, respect to her for stepping in and taking this fight with literally all those odds against her. I mean, and for Joanne, she has a lot. I mean, fighting at home, stuff like that. There's a lot of pressure in that too. Now it's sort of like a fight where it's like, all right, I'm supposed to win this, so that adds a little extra pressure. And it looks like I don't know if she's going to struggle with the submissions, but Courtney has a shot there, and I think this will be a good fight.
Of course, what we've seen so far, Joanne Calderwood's weakness is being pressured, and especially being pressured early. And if you're Casey, you got to go attack her and get close, because if you stand in front of her or you try to kind of circle around and move a lot, she has proved that she will catch you. She'll kind of lull you into sleep and use her great kicks and punching combinations to beat you. That's mainly her MO. And if you allow her to do that, I mean, she's 9-1. She's proved that she can do that. But if you get in and pressure her, you can do what Marina Moroz did, and then also what Rose Namajunas did in The Ultimate Fighter. You can submit her.
Yeah.
But if you're not able to get in close, you're not going to have a chance.
Yeah, don't give her time to breathe. You got to move forward at her the whole time, keep her flustered, and then she's been proven to leave opportunities open in that. So
the next matchup of the evening is in the lightweight division, and if Billy was excited about Conor McGregor fighting last weekend, then he's got to be excited for the last man to beat Conor McGregor and Joe Duffy as he takes on Ivan George. Looking at Joe Duffy, 13-1 in his career, 8 of 13 career victories are by submission. So far, he is riding a 3-fight winning streak. He defeated Jake Lindsay in his UFC debut, first-round knockout at UFC 185. And as I said, kind of known as the last man to beat Conor McGregor, as he submitted Conor McGregor with an arm triangle choke back in 2010 in the first round. And also, he holds a victory over another UFC fighter in Norman Park, submitting Norman Park. It's not listed as a round. They don't have that information, but that's a pretty big victory as well. And the only loss in his career, he got submitted in the 4th round of a Cage Warriors championship fight against Ivan Mustardo. So this guy is pretty impressive. This Joseph Duffy, 27 years old, fighting out of Ireland, as he takes on Ivan George with the nickname of Batman. 26-4 in his career. 13 of 26 career victories are by submission. So far in the UFC, 2-1. His last fight, he defeated Josh Shockley at UFC Fight Night 61. And both are listed at 5'10". Both have completely different physiques. As you look at Ivan George, he looks like a little tank. And then you got Joseph Duffy, who's a little more longer and leaner. Both have a lot of submission victories to their credit. I don't know. This is a very intriguing matchup. Like I said, the appeal of Duffy with beating Conor McGregor a couple of years ago, probably labeled as the favorite, and also could be a breakout star. Ivan, towards the end of his career, now 34 years old, this will be his 31st professional fight. Obviously a solid competitor, but I don't know. This is very intriguing. I don't know what's going to really happen with this one, because I think Duffy probably has the edge standing up, but if it gets to grappling, they both have a lot of submission victories to their credit, and I think if it does go to the ground, I still think we might see some fireworks in that aspect as well.
Yeah, I was gonna say on the feet, it does. It looks like I'd probably edge it to Duffy. He looks super impressive. He had a strong knockout, but if this does go to the ground, I don't know where it'll go either way. But I think they'll both have good chances there, and I really don't know who to edge it to. So I think Duffy's best shot here. Just kind of looking at the physique of George, I don't know a whole lot about him. He'd probably be better to keep it on the feet and be able to outwork him there, but we'll see where this goes.
I would also say for Duffy, because of his physique, it looks as though he cuts a lot of weight to make 155. Yeah. I'd try to get this thing into the third round.
That's what I'm saying.
That's kind of, I hate to use the term sandbagging, but whether that means kind of, maybe not going quite 100%, waiting to the third round and then exploding on him and kind of coming out of nowhere, I think in this fight may be a very apt strategy.
Yeah. And I mean, Joe Duffy, he could blow up so quick. It's so crazy how that win over Conor McGregor can do so much for him in this division, though.
Absolutely. The co-main event of the evening at 155 pounds as Ross Pearson will take on Evan Dunham. Man, both of these guys have been around in the UFC for a very long time. Ross Pearson made his debut in the UFC back in 2009. Has since then fought in 2 different weight classes. Since moving back up to 155 pounds, that was back in 2012, he has won 4 of 7 fights with 2 losses, and also there was that no contest he had against Melvin Guillard. Most recently, a win knocking out Sam Stout in the second round at the UFC 185 card, and overall in his career, 7 of 17 victories by knockout. Looking at Evan Dunham, he made his debut back in 2009. Most recently has fell on hard times. Since 2013, has only won 2 fights. He was able to snap a 3-fight losing streak, however, this year at UFC 182, defeating Rodrigo Dam. And 6 of his 15 career victories are by submission. I think for Dunham, even though he kind of broke that 3-fight losing streak, I honestly think if his back's up against the wall again, that wasn't Rodrigo Dam's not really that good. I'm going to be straight honest. And yeah, it was a win, but it wasn't a finish win. Let's remind that. He did enough to get the victory, was definitely bigger than Rodrigo Dam. But if he loses to Ross Pearson, that's 4 out of 5 losses. I don't know how much intriguing he really is. I mean, he's now 33 years old. He's no longer the hot prospect, in the 155 division, now fighting in the UFC for 6 years. Ross Pearson not quite fighting at home, but I mean, the fans of Scotland, I gotta believe, are going to be behind Ross Pearson as opposed to Evan Dunham. He has that advantage there. And I just think Ross Pearson, despite, he's had a couple losses mixed in there, like I said, he's, won 4 of his last 7. I think he's looked really good. I really think, honestly, besides that loss to Iaquinta back in November of last year, I mean, he's beat George Sotiropoulos, Ryan Couture, and Gray Maynard, and he had what, in my opinion, should have been a win against Diego Sanchez. Since moving back to 155, I think he's looked really good, and I think Evan Dunham can present problems for Ross Pearson, but he's got to stay moving, and he's got to throw a lot of kicks. He's got to keep circling, because if you're going to try to stand there and trade hands with Ross Pearson, that usually doesn't work out too well for you.
Yeah, I don't see too much of a problem on. I mean, Evan Dunham, he's trending down, and he's still, even though he gets that win, I think this is sort of his last shot here. And Ross Pearson, there's not many people I think that can stand trade. He's got really good hands, and if Evan Dunham stands there with him, I don't think it'll be a good night for him.
The main event of the evening will be in the middleweight division as Thales Leites will take on Michael Bisping. Since returning to the UFC, Thales Leites has looked pretty darn good, as he returned back to the organization, I believe, 2 years ago. Double checking that. Yes, in 2013. Since that point, has won 5 in a row, and if you extend it back, he has not lost since 2010, overall, winning 8 fights in a row. And some of those wins outside the organization include Matt Horwich, Jeremy Horn, and Tor Trowing. And so far, since coming back to the UFC, he's defeated Tom Watson, Ed Herman, Trevor Smith, Francis Carmal, and Tim Boesch, with those last 3 being the most impressive, knocking out Carmal and Smith and then submitting Tim Boesch back at UFC 183 for his most recent victory. 25-4 in his career with 14 of 25 victories by submission, taking on a long-time middleweight guy there, Michael Bisping. Most recently defeated CB Dalloway at UFC 186. 15 of 26 career victories are by knockout. Looking at Michael Bisping's record, he has only been submitted once in his career, and I'm trying to look that up here. He lost by submission. Let's see here. Oh, the Luke Rockhold fight last year. That was the only time he's ever been submitted in his career, which now stands 34 professional fights. Not to say that Talas Leites can't do it. He's probably a better submission guy than Luke Rockhold, but Rockhold set that up with strikes. While Talas Leites has improved in the striking category, I'm not sure if it's still at the level of Michael Bisping. Michael Bisping's also notoriously hard to get to the ground. And if it doesn't get to the ground, I'm not sure how long Leites can unstand the onslaught of Michael Bisping, who is kind of one of the original guys of, punches and bunches and, just throwing a lot of output to get his knockouts. And I'm not sure if Leites can do that. But if somehow Leites can get this thing to the ground, be on top, it turns into a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, I really like Leites, and his little run here has been impressive, but he's going to have a lot of problems with Bisping. If he can deal with the output, because Bisping's going to be constantly on you. He's constantly throwing combinations and everything. And then if you can get him down or get him in like a scramble or something to even work your submissions, it's going to be hard for him to even get there. So I think Bisping will have a good time this fight, just keeping his movement up, keeping his output up, and keep Leites moving backwards.
Now, this is the winner of this fight, big things happened for. I know Bisping's been a contender for many years, but beating Leites, I think, kind of shoots him back up. And if you're Leites, if you get this win, that may only put you one fight away from fighting for the title again. That would now be his 6th fight in a row victory for the UFC, 9th overall. And if he beats a guy the caliber of Bisping, even if he doesn't get a finish, I think the UFC is really going to start to look at that. And that really puts him up there, with the Jacarés and the Luke Rockholds and the Yoel Romeros of the world.
Yeah, I think we're finally going to see that Jacare-Romero matchup. And then I think Rockhold probably getting the champ. I'd like to see one of these guys fight maybe Machida after that or something.
Yeah, he is still up there as well. And if Tim Kennedy ever decides to actually fight someone, I think Talas Leites against Tim Kennedy would even be a solid matchup.
Yeah, whoever wins this, they need to get someone on the back end of that top five. So most of the top 1 through 4 is booked up. But even though Machida is coming off bad losses, actually, he might be out for a while. I forgot. I don't know how long he's out, but he's still a guy up there to worry about. So a big fight for the winner of this fight.
With that said, let's get to picks. UFC Fight Night Glasgow, the first fight of the evening in the lightweight division. Stevie Ray against Leonardo Mafra. I think your Braveheart rousing here got me, Billy, so I'm going to go with Stevie Ray to win this one.
It's good to hear. Braveheart all the way. Freedom!
The next fight of the evening comes in the welterweight division. Leon Edwards against Palal Palalik. Like I said, was not real impressed with Palalik in his last effort, so I'm going to go with Mr. Edwards in this one.
Yeah, I like Edwards too. Haven't seen too much because he's been so good, but hopefully we see a little more and he gets his win.
All right. Courtney Casey against Joanne Calderwood. Like I said, I think Casey can end up doing things in this division, but the timing, not great, having to take on JoJo Calderwood with all the things I mentioned. So I'm going with JoJo in this one.
Yeah, respect to Courtney for taking this fight, but Joanne needs this fight, and she has a lot on her side here. So Calderwood.
At 155, Joseph Duffy against Ivan George. Man, I don't know. It's not all Conor McGregor, but he has looked really good and has had a great winning streak. But let's go with Mr. Duffy to win this one.
Yeah, I agree. Duffy has a lot of potential in the UFC, and he looked really good in his last fight. And I think if he pulls us in the later rounds, he should be able to get a finish.
Ross Pearson against Evan Dunham for the co-main event. Always been a big fan of Ross Pearson, going back to the Ultimate Fighter. And like I said, I don't know, Evan Dunham's looked pretty bad his last few fights, even with beating Rodrigo Dam. So give me the real deal, Ross Pearson, in this one.
Yeah, I think Ross Pearson gets a big knockout here. Evan Dunham shouldn't stand in front of him.
Main event of the evening, Michael Bisping against Talas Leites. I'm going to do something I normally don't do. My head, and I think the smart pick's taking Michael Bisping. But I've never been a huge fan of Bisping, and Talas Leites has been on a roll. I know it's not quite his home country, but pretty darn close in Scotland. I'm going to go with the upset here, and I'm going to go Talas Leites in this one. I know I got outlined, and I kind of shaded my pick to Bisping having more tools to win. But with that said, there's something about guys on a roll, and that is Talas Leites. So I'm going to go with the upset here and take the Brazilian.
I respect that, and I like that. But I just think there's something about Bisping, man. He finds a way to stay in that top 10 and just stay in there. So I think Bisping will win a nice decision here.
All right, before we end the show, was there anything you would like to add, Billy?
No, I just hope these great fights keep coming because every card has followed through.
Definitely excited for this weekend's card, and definitely glad the fans in Scotland finally get to see a UFC fight. And I think this things sold out pretty quickly, and I think kind of with Calderwood, you got Joseph Duffy now, Conor McGregor. There's quite a few up and coming English guy. Like I said, Stevie Ray now is kind of the male equivalent of Joanne Calderwood for Scottish MMA. And I kind of would like to see more cards in Europe. As weird as that sounds, I think the fan base is starting to kind of grow again, maybe thanks to Conor. A couple of years ago, they were going over to England hardcore, and they've kind of laid off a bit. And I think some of those UK cards are pretty good. And the time zone's not that bad for us here in America, at least on the eastern side. I mean, it's only 5 hours difference. It's not that big a deal. It's not like when they go to China, it's like 18 hours and it's shown at like 6 o'clock in the morning. I mean,
right.
It's relatively easy for most of us to see the fight. So I really don't mind it. And I think the crowds there have been pretty good for the UFC, the reaction and whatnot. So I hope this is more things to come. And I like places, getting fights that don't normally get fights as too. I always think that's the good thing. That's what always generates extra buzz. And I think the fans are extra excited to finally have an event.
Like Detroit.
Exactly. All right. For Billy Brand, you can follow him on Twitter at WBrand21. I am your host, Jim Gramm, at Jim Gramm on Twitter. And once again, thank you for listening to another edition of the Beyond the Cage podcast.